Well, thank you so much for allowing me to come and share. This is kind of my swan song. In just 3 weeks, my wife and I, my wife Chris is here with me. We will no longer be North Carolina residents. We will be citizens of the second most great state in the Union, of Indiana. I would like to say I'm moving there because it's bright red. It is, but I'm moving there because of Charlotte Joe, who's 4 years old, and for Bo Alexander, who's 1 year old. That's why we're moving there. So our commitment is for that and that purpose only. You can come on through. Just to give you a quick little background on myself, I was a pastor for 34 years. And the last number of years, I've been working for an organization called the American Pastors Network. We have a radio program called Stand in the Gap Today. It's on about 700 stations nationwide. We have an app that you can go to, American Pastors Network, or Stand in the Gap, and listen to us there. I'm on there usually almost every Tuesday. And the president of the American Pastors Network, Sam Rohr, he served in the Pennsylvania State House of Representatives for 20 years, ran for governor, lost, and a whole bunch of pastors came to him and said, "We're really glad you lost." Now, you know what it's like losing a campaign, so that wasn't really a great moment. And he said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "Because when you were campaigning and you were speaking at our churches, we heard things that our church had never heard before." And what happened was he launched this organization and ministry to both speak to pastors, to educate them, and to help them know how to speak on issues of government, education, foreign issues, and to help them understand how to bring a biblical worldview to things that are happening in the world and in the culture and in the nation. And so that began 13 years ago. About 2 years into it, the radio station guy came to and said, "I wonder, could you do an hour for us every week?" And an hour turned into 5 days a week and also into a weekend, and now we have a television program, and we're taking that message. My job is, because of my pastoral background, my job is the director of church culture. Because pastor is our middle name, and Sam comes from the governmental side and political side, I come from the ministry side. And I founded a church, and I know what it's like to be involved in the public square. But I also have been a lifelong Republican. First time I pulled the lever and moved the curtain forward was for Ronald Reagan. And I pretty much haven't missed an election since. And when I moved here to Wake County, I walked into their office up by Spring Forest Road. And I walked in and I said, "I'm here, can you use me?" And shockingly, nobody wanted to use me. And then finally, after keep hanging around and being persistent, some of the people at Wake GOP then said, "Hey, could you help us?" I know some of you in here because I was on the Candidate Development Recruitment Committee and did a lot of the interviewing and vetting for candidates. And that was shocking because one of my questions that I asked our candidates, which they were kind of taken back, I said, "Tell me 5 reasons why you're a Republican." If I was around, I'd ask you that question. And it was like right now, silence in the room. The second meeting we had, the rest of the committee thought, "Oh, he's going to do it again. He's going to ask, give me 5 reasons why you're a Republican." And I did. The second time around for the candidates, I asked this question: "Give me 5 reasons why we need to defeat a Democrat." And it was silent again. And so I wrote 2 papers, Why I'm a Republican and Who Are the Modern Democrats. And this then became circulating within GOP politics because I have found that a lot of our Republican candidates don't know why they're Republicans and can articulate it and convince the people on the street why they should be a Republican. And even worse, they can't take out their Swiss Army knife and start slicing away at who a Democrat is and open that up for people to see. Now you're saying to yourself, this guy was a pastor? God help that church. But I'm somebody who really believes we need to understand the issues of the day because we've got to help people. We've got to educate people. So I think Brent knew I was leaving. He said, we better get one more shot out of him. So he asked me to come. And so he asked me to talk about faith and politics, which I love to do. But I want to give you some perspectives. Perspective is an interesting thing. One of my favorite stories about perspective is this general and his assistant corporal were traveling across Europe, and they were on one of those older railroad trains going across Europe. You know, the kind that has the little car inside the train where the seats are looking at each other and they're traveling along. You've seen the movies, right? And so this general and his corporal, they're in one of these cars, and right across from them is this mother and 20-something daughter who's very attractive. And it's very noticeable that the corporal and the daughter have caught each other's eyes, and they're kind of smiling and giggling and looking at each other, and the general's getting annoying and the mother's getting worried. And then all of a sudden, as they're traveling, they go into a tunnel and the lights go out. And moments later, in the silence, you hear a kiss, and then you hear a smack. About a minute later, the lights come on, and everybody is red-faced. So what were they thinking? I'll tell you what the mother was thinking. Good for her. He tried to get fresh with her. He tried to kiss her. Maybe he did, and she hauled off and hit him. The general was thinking, my assistant kissed that girl and offended her, and she went to slap him and missed him and hit me. And the daughter was saying, well, too bad. He tried to kiss me. He kissed my mother. And the corporal is saying, I have never had so much fun kissing the back of my hand and slapping a general. The same event, the same car, and 4 different perspectives. And that's pretty much like what it is in life. I mean, if there was a car accident and you were in 4 different corners of an intersection, you would all have seen something different. Well, when it comes to faith and politics, there are 4 perspectives that we all need to understand. And you may not agree with these things, and you may not even be a person of faith here today. But being people who are involved in politics, just like I'm involved in ministry and pastoral work, it's important for me to understand politics. You need to understand faith and how it fits in politics. So here are the 4 perspectives. I'll give them to you, and then we're going to have some Q&A. But the first and most important one is God's perspective. Because God has a perspective about how we should be involved in politics or involved with the culture and involved with government and those kind of things. And maybe you'd be surprised. The Bible is replete with what God had said. God wrote a book. It's the Bible. And so here are things. And I put them in there for you. You can read for yourself. But I'll just give you a couple of them. One of my favorite verses is Jeremiah 29, 4-7. Jeremiah the prophet speaking to the Jews who had been kidnapped out of their home, taken to a foreign land, and now they're living in Babylon in this kidnapped state, but they're allowed to live their lives. And here's what he says. He says, look, I have put you in exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. So here's what I want you to do. Build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat them, take wives and have sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters and multiply there and do not decrease. Basically what he was saying was, become part of the community. This isn't your home, but build your home, make your home there, have a business, have wealth, make money so you can be benevolent, and have a lot of kids, and have a great family and influence. And then look what it says. But seek the welfare of the city. Are you kidding me? They've been kidnapped. These are their enemies. And God said to them, I don't care how bad the culture is where you're living. I need you to influence that city and pray for that city. That's been my life verse as a pastor. Whatever city I have gone into, I have sought to seek the welfare of that city, Whether I had a Republican mayor, most times it was a Democrat mayor, and every year I would go to the mayor. I had a standing appointment in February, and Pat, his secretary, lined it up, and I went to the mayor and I said, Mayor, you and I don't get along politically, but you're my mayor. I need to help you become a success. What can I do for you to make you a success?
Very nice.
Now, after the paramedics brought him back to life, he understood, and he said to me, why do you say this? I said, because God told me to say it. And then 2 Timothy, you know this, we're told to pray for our leaders. And it's interesting there. In this context, Paul is writing to Timothy, and you know who the emperor of Rome is? Nero, who were burning Christians. And God says, when it comes to politics and government, you're to pray for those people, no matter who they are. You keep going, Peter, same kind of thing. He had Nero, and he said, even in the midst of evil politicians. I know it's like jumbo shrimp. Doesn't fit, right? And military intelligence. Good politicians. They're all evil. No, they're not. But if they get really bad, he says we're to endure them. We're not to overthrow the government. We're to be supportive. And by that, we'll have influence. Keep going. Romans 13, God tells them again, this is how government's supposed to work. The government is to punish the lawbreaker and praise the lawkeeper. And you're to hold the government accountable for that. But also the government's supposed to hold us accountable because we're to submit to them. And I didn't put it in here just because I didn't want to annoy you, and pay your taxes.
Christ did.
In Acts 22, Paul was being held by the magistrate, and he was going to be unjustly dealt with. Well, some Christians think you should just roll over and take it. Not Paul. You know what Paul said? I'm a Roman citizen. And one of the leaders there in Rome, he went to the magistrate and he said, I just want you to know, he's a citizen. We can't do this to one of our own citizens. And Paul had no problem standing up and saying, these are my rights. I have to tell you, I work with a lot of pastors. They're scared to death to go to the government and say, as an entity, you can't treat us this way. I watched more pastors roll over and play dead during COVID, and it was shocking. Shocking. We left the church after sitting outside for over a year when we had a 600-seat auditorium that we could have sat in. And a pastor absolutely fearful of doing anything against the government. And so I don't see that. But I also balance it this way, and I'll give you one last verse. In Daniel, and Daniel was, as you understand, he was second in charge in the kingdom. Daniel said this, blessed be the name of God forever, to whom belongs all wisdom and might. He changes times and season. He removes kings and sets up kings. So at the end of the day, what God's word says is, when it comes to politics, government, you do all you can to help people get elected, but at the end of the day, God's the one who puts them in. Now, I'm going to give you my personal opinion. I know this is being taped. Please don't show this on Facebook tonight. I think God allowed Donald Trump to lose.
Yes.
Yeah. So
He did us a favor.
Yes.
To show the truth of the Democrats.
He did us a favor.
I agree.
Because he allowed us to see the contrast of how bad things could be, so that now we have the ability to make the changes. But in 2020, we all were not happy.
No.
Why? Because God sees it all. And see, as a person of faith, when I look at politics, that's what I see. I see what God sees. And so God's perspective about politics is going to be very different than us. But it's important to understand. It's important to understand that people of faith believe this. Well, there's a second thing. There's a second perspective, and that is the world, the culture, the people who are not people of faith. The people out there, maybe people who are even anti-faith people. And because I'm an evangelical Christian, I would say anti-Christ kind of people. But I need to understand what they think of me. So here's what I believe, my opinion. This is what I believe the world and the culture and the non-faith people think of me. First thing is that we are trying to convert them, or at a minimum to change them. When they see us coming, they see like an evangelist with a bad leisure suit and white shoes. Okay, they see they think we're coming to convert them, and that may be a bad representation, a misrepresentation, but that's what they think. Second thing is that we're condemning their behavior and their choices. See, when they hear me talk about believing that an unborn baby in a womb is a person, is a life, and should not be aborted, yet they have had an abortion, and then when they hear sometimes people in my camp talk about it as murder, then you have just said that they are a murderer. I condemn them. And when I talk about all the other issues that would fall out of the purview of the Bible and faith and Christianity, those kinds of things, they view that as you are condemning me personally and where I stand. And as much as we can try to nuance that, that's very difficult. But that's how they think. Third thing is they think that we want to make America into a theocracy. Meaning we want to create this place, not just as a Christian nation, but a nation that is ruled by God, God's word, and everything. And I can tell you right now, at least from my perspective, that is not what the Christian community or the faith community wants. But we want to be heard. And we don't see that we should be silent. I don't believe that there is a separation of church and state. I think there's a separation of the state into the church. And history can prove that. Fourth, that we stand in the way of their agenda. This is probably the core of it. They have a certain thing that they want to push forward, just like we have a certain thing we want to push forward. But I don't view them as somebody who's stopping my agenda. I'm looking at them as somebody I can dialogue with. No. They look at somebody like me as standing in the way of progress and standing in the way of their agenda. Fifth, that we never compromise. We never compromise. And in some respects, they're right in that way because we don't like the word compromise, but there is always room for compromise in some things, but not on biblical convictions. And that's where they see that there's no compromise. And finally this, if all those things are true, if 1 through 5 is true, then you got to come to the sixth conclusion, and that is, if all those other things are true, these people of faith, these Christians, they must be silenced. And they have to be canceled. And we can't even allow them to have a conversation in the public square. We have to shut them down. Now, I'm trying not to be too rough on them, but the fact of the matter is, when I dialogue with anybody who is not a person of faith involved in politics and maybe on the left or even leaning left, I come at it and say to myself, that's where they start. I got a long way to go to bring them over. But as anybody will know, you debate anybody, you have any kind of dialogue, you better understand where they're coming from if you want to win them over. Which brings me to the third perspective. Where do I see people of faith right now? Where do I see churches, church leaders, pastors? What is our perspective? And I think you're going to be surprised what my perspective is of our perspective. Because I'm not going to be kind. 6 words. First is I think the faith community is very confused right now. Very confused. When I talk to pastors, which I do a lot, I try to help them understand their role in the culture and in government and politics. And I say, look, here's the mistake that Christians make. We either have quietists or we have activists. Quietists, they don't say anything. They say we shouldn't have a voice. We should keep ourselves quiet. We got to stay above the fray. We shouldn't be involved. We shouldn't engage. And then there are activists. We should be protesting. We should be shutting down things. We should be standing in front with signs. And so we have this two ends of the spectrum, quietists and activists. And I want to tell you right now, I think both are wrong. What would help is if we go back to the first century, in the time of Paul and the time of the early church. Because there was a word that came out of the first century. It was a Latin word. It was politeia. And the word meant public life or public discourse. Even the idea of the ecclesia, which in Greek, we translate that word the church. Well, the ecclesia was a place of gathering in every town where they came and they dialogued. And even though Christians were viewed as this kind of cult group that came out of Judaism, they still had allowed to come and dialogue and bring their opinions and bring their ideas and have their influence. And I want to tell you that I think the mistake that the church and people of faith are making in regards to politics is because of their lack of understanding and their lack of relationships and their lack of interaction. They've lost their voice. They have no way to influence the conversation because they're not even at the table. They're either protesting or hiding. And that's a failure. Big time failure. That's why I do what I do. I'm trying to help raise the level of the politeia again within the Christian community. And it's hard sledding. Secondly, conflicted. Here's what I mean. And we've seen this in the last 8 to 10 years since the magic walk down the escalator. Most of the Christian leaders and most of the Christians today you will find within the evangelical camp, which is probably the largest of the Protestant Christian influence here in America, is they don't know how to separate personality from policy. Now look, I want to tell you right now, I don't agree with Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump, some of his behaviors. I don't like his decisions. I really wish he would listen to Franklin Graham and stop cursing. Yeah. I thought it was absolutely, I did laugh hysterically. Here it was National Day of Prayer, and he said, "What the hell is going on?" And I just wanted to tell him, Donald, it's all pastors and priests and rabbis. Stop. I don't like some of his behavior, but I love his policies. And the problem is, and I think it's more so of an excuse so they don't have to be involved. Pastors and Christians have risen up and saying, I don't like his personality, and so I'm not going to be involved with him. Until you start to show them some of the other personalities on the other side of the camp and said, well, then you got a problem. Listen, there's only one time I ever went to vote where I didn't vote the lesser of two evils. Only one time. And it was voting for my boss at the American Pastors Network to be governor. I tell him that. You're the only time, Sam, that I ever voted in a primary for somebody that I didn't have to hold my nose for. And Christians, for some reason or other, can't get over this. But we got to help them. We got to help them to see that there's something greater and higher, especially in light of everything, the policies he's doing, what he's promised. Third thing, convictions. If the Bible says it, that settles it. Well, I'm in that camp. And that's what we need to focus on. I wish, as Christians, we would fully understand biblically where some of these issues stand so we can speak with biblical conviction. Like immigration. I do not believe that we're to be loving to everybody because they are, quote unquote, our neighbor. I can't get into a deeper conversation, but the only place we have in the Bible that speaks about an immigration issue was during the year of Jubilee in the Jewish calendar. It was the 50th year, and one of the things that they were allowed to do was to bring in somebody from outside of Israel into Israel and let them enter into an immigration system. And the system was you had to let them live in your house and assimilate them for the year of Jubilee. And so when Nancy Pelosi opens up her mansion in San Francisco, I'm with her. And the problem is Christians don't know how to speak on these issues because they've never taken the time to actually look in the Bible and say, what does the Bible say? And speak them with authority. And say, this is what God says. I'm going to stick with what God says. Whether it's fashionable within my party or not. Number 4, compromise. It is not a 4-letter word. Christians have to understand when you're in politics, it's 2 conflicting ideas pulling at each other. That's what politics is. Tug of war. And the whole idea is how do we pull and tug enough to settle on a decision that will be beneficial for the whole and for the greater good. And for that to happen, as people of faith, we're going to have to compromise on some issues. We're going to have to give up budget issues. We're going to have to pay taxes. We're going to have to give in on certain things as far as we can without breaking conviction. But we're going to have to learn to compromise. Number 5, cowards. This is a tough one. Pastors are afraid to speak to their churches because they're fearful of division. Well, because they're not speaking on issues from the Bible, they're not speaking on conviction, they're not speaking to things that basically to help educate people. Mistake. And cowardly. And finally, connection. We must learn how to minister to elected officials. I do a seminar for our ministry, how to minister to elected officials. I think it's the greatest mission field in the whole world. I've been doing it for 20 plus years. I know who my mayors were. One of my good friends was the chief of police. Every year we had a civil government Sunday at our church. We invited everybody who was running for an election, so you would be there, and anybody who's in office, and they would be there, and they would come. They came. They came every year. They filled rows of people because they were coming for what reason? To get a vote. That's why you would come, and you should come. You have only so many Sundays before election, you come. And so I would open up my church, and I say, I would come and meet the people, and it would give me a chance to then share from my perspective how we see some of these issues. We became their friends on both sides of the aisle. I was able to speak to the issue. When I went and saw Mayor Gray, after the second time, and I said to the mayor, I said, Mayor, how can I help you be successful? What can we do to help you? And he finally said, well, I have something. He said, you know, our budgets took a major hit, yeah. Low-income families don't have money to replace the batteries in their smoke detectors. Would you be able to help? I said, how much? He said, $5,000. I said, you got it. I said, who's going to deliver the batteries? He said, the firemen. I said, if we could get some of our people to go along with the firemen and deliver the batteries, would you allow us to do it? And he said, absolutely. We helped the need. I helped the Democratic mayor. And our people got to meet some of the people in our community. That's a win. Really came helpful because we did an expansion on our church. And I went in to see Bill, the zoning man. And he told me it was going to cost $450,000 to put in sprinkle system into our entire 70-year-old church to take care of a little lobby. And it was just too much money. As I was leaving City Hall with our architect, the mayor sees me, the Democrat mayor. The mayor who he and I couldn't see eye to eye on nothing. He said, hey, Rev, what's happening? I said, well, Mayor, not too happy. He said, what's the matter? I said, well, you know, we're trying to do a lobby expansion. I said, well, Bill, your zoning guy just hit us up for about $400,000 over the cost of things for a sprinkler system. He said, go back to your office, I'll call you. Within a half hour, Bill called us and said, can you bring your architect in tomorrow? I said, did you talk to the mayor? He said, yeah. Came in, I sat down with him, and he said, I've been thinking about this all night. would you mind if we change the name of your lobby from a lobby to a hallway? Because you're walking from that end of the building to that end of the building. And if you could just remove the word lobby from the plans, you don't have to do a sprinkler system. Why did that happen? Because I sought the welfare of the city. I knew my mayor. I got involved. I engaged him. So what do? As politicians, as GOP party, say, okay, you got all this information, what do we do with it? We'll give you a couple of things that may help you. Number one, you need to understand them, meaning us, and let them know that you understand them. When you're talking about people of faith who may say to you, I really don't want to be involved on a Monday night at a political dinner, or I really don't want to go out and campaign, or I don't want to knock on doors, or I break out in hives and this kind of thing. Hey, I understand completely. I know as a person of faith like that, you have certain biblical convictions, and I know some of this stuff in politics must seem distasteful. But I want you to know I understand that, I respect you, but at the same time, I think your voice and your ideas need to be heard in our circle. And so I would hope that you would consider being involved at that reason. Secondly, accept the fact that they're going to make your life miserable at times. Enough said. Number three, engage them in meaningful ways in what they are concerned about. I don't know what their button would be, but some people may not want to even be involved in politics. One of the things that the Wake GOP asked me to do, and I said to them, look, I'll interview candidates for you, but I'm past the part of being involved or running for anything or whatever. Let me just help by interviewing your candidates, because I think I'd be good at that, and I can help them, I can teach them. And then it came to me and said, hey, would you be willing to run a prayer meeting? I said, for the GOP? Yeah. And so Monday nights, from last April until really the inauguration, we had a Monday night prayer meeting from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. And we had dozens of people joining us, and we prayed through everything. And a lot of the Christians who I know wouldn't have been involved with anything GOP, but they came on the Zoom call. And they met candidates, because I had candidates come on and share their story and share their life and tell about them, and we prayed for them. And we engaged a whole bunch of people of faith in the political process, but it wasn't the political process. It was what they liked to do, which was to pray. Number 4, get to their pastor. You got to get to their pastors. And you got to help them understand the issues. Don't ask them for a vote. Don't ask them to speak to anybody. Just say, look, I want to be a source of help to you. I want to tell you what we're dealing with. I want to tell you what we're dealing with in the General Assembly. I want to tell you what we're dealing with in the governor's office, and so on and so forth. Number 5, ask them to pray. Ask them to pray. Number 6, find good works opportunities that they can do these things together in the community. I tried to do this, and I was an abject failure in my 7 years living here in Raleigh, but I was much more successful up in Pennsylvania. We had a thing that we did every year, and had 100 churches and Christian businessmen involved with a week long of doing good for our city. And the culmination of that was on Saturday, when 2,000 people with the same neon shirts and garbage bags in hand and rubber gloves spread out from our local baseball stadium to northeast, south, and west, and went in all different directions and picked up garbage for 2.5 hours. We just did good. We cleaned up our city. And they were people of faith doing that. But I would say it'd be a great thing for the GOP to think about, releasing your community, and say, let's do a town-wide cleanup day together, and get out there and be noticed that you're doing something good for the community. And finally, if you are a personal faith, naturally allow your love for God to be seen, and share how your faith influences what you do and the decisions you make. and be unashamed that you are a person of faith. Don't try to jam it down people's throats, but just say, hey, I'm motivated because God tells me to seek the welfare of the city and to respect authority and to have influence and to raise the level of the politeia in the community we live. Was that what you're looking for? Was that okay?
That's great. Yeah.
I want to please the boss here. All right, questions? Yeah.
Thank you for being here, and certainly Indiana's gain is our loss, North Carolina. Thank you for what you're doing overall. But I wanted to ask you the thing about this last campaign, what Dr. Franklin Graham was doing, and particularly his epistle that he said the choice between two Americas was the most incredible thing I've ever read a spiritual leader of a national magnitude do. Give me your perspective on that, or of what Franklin Graham and others may be doing for
Well, I love Franklin, and I love what he does. But understand, Franklin has a voice, because this morning he deployed a couple hundred people to Missouri and Kentucky to rescue the people who had tornadoes hit.
Yes.
And so he has a place to stand, and he understands that. And I think we need to understand that as well. I appreciate what's happening in the Office of Faith down there, and I think, again, as a person of faith and someone who's involved in politics and understands politics, I mean, the National Day of Prayer did not get the kind of highlights it got. But this president just set up a commission studying religious liberty, and not just for Christianity, but for Jews and Muslims and all people of faith, and saying that what makes our nation great is faith. And what's interesting, there's a book titled Seeking the Welfare of the City, and they study cities. And if you look in America, how did they determine what a city was? Well, here's how, in early days, how cities were constructed. Number one, every city had a wall to determine its boundary lines and to provide security. Every city had resources that then created commerce, because you can't have a city if you don't have wealth and commerce. And every city had a church, because it was the basis of why the pastor was so needed and the priest was so needed. They were bringing the moral fabric to the city so that the laws would then work. So every city has to have security. It has to have a means to make wealth, and it has to have a sacred focus. And that was true for the nation. It's true for anything. Great civilizations go to the waysides because they have no security, they have no commerce, and they have no sacred presence. And I think our president knows this, and I, again, go back and I appreciate what Franklin did, but I think Franklin has the standing because of the other things he does. Look, he could run for governor. He has rescued single-handedly Western North Carolina. And I think that's where we have to show. And just one other point about this. We're concerned about young people finding their way into the GOP and into conservative circles. They want to. This next generation wants to, because they've seen the lack of common sense of the generation before them. If the GOP and conservatives can start flexing their muscles and doing good works and making it visible, you'll win the young people.
We're winning.
Because they want to do something that will make a difference in people's lives. So just a note this up. Yes?
I'm going to start off with first, Vicki, a good verse that my kids were raised on, and I think we all need to do it, knowing that we're trying to do God's work. Joshua 1:9. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or dismayed. The Lord your God is with you wherever you go. We know the Democrats' tactics. You need to be strong, let him be strong.
Do you have a question for me? Because that's what we're having. I need questions, because I've got, I don't, if you have a question for me, that'd be great.
I wanted to piggyback off of some of the stuff that you said.
Share, if you have a question for me, that would be great.
But I'm just reading from what I wrote according.
If you have a
to what
question for me, that would be great. That's what this is for. If you want
Okay.
to speak here, you can talk to Brett.
All right, so, what's your thoughts on the banding together with the common sense truth and the way the Democrats are active, but, doing that as Christians? I liked what you said about the, first and foremost, we need to be able and be ready to give our testimony to lead people to God. But we also need to be that same person when answering the questions as to why am I Republican? What do we stand for? What are we trying to do? And what, so what are your thoughts on, also the colleges? You were just talking about the young ones. They have the colleges and the media. We need to be strong and not afraid.
Yeah. Well, I think as Vicky said, I think Charlie Kirk right now is the model. Is the model. You go, you dialogue. He is doing politeia. If you ever pull up Charlie Kirk on YouTube, when he goes to these colleges, he sits there, he answers questions, he dialogues. He is my hero in that realm. But that is the politeia, and he has a good pastor who has taught him what ecclesia is. So it's very good. Any other questions? That's it?
Thank you.
Okay.